Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our session. My name is Adriana Frique, and I'll be moderating our panel today, Bridging Borders, Charging Forward, National Perspectives on EV Charging. I hope everyone can hear me. Please raise your hand if everyone can hear me in the headsets. Perfect. Just a couple of house rules keeping. Basically, if you're wearing the headset from our masterclass, it's supposed to be the one with the red color. Otherwise, if you're wearing the blue one, you'll be hearing the main stage discussions. And please make sure to return this after the session, and so we can use them for the next session. So we have a stellar lineup for our panel, and I think this is a very promising start for a very engaging and insightful discussion. We'll be touching upon national perspectives on shaping customer experience, looking at infrastructure maturity, at best practices, if the charging experience is where we need to have it, and what we need to do to improve it. Before we kick off our panel, I would like to start with a very short introduction round from my right to left and ask everyone to briefly introduce themselves and the associations that they're representing. Francesco, you have the privilege to start first.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. I'm Francesco Naso. I am the Secretary General of MotoC. MotoC is the National Association of the Industry of E-Mobility in Italy, and I'm part of the board of the Electric Mobility Europe.
Jared?
Good morning, everybody. My name's Jared Birch. I'm Head of Policy at Charge UK. As the name would suggest, we are the association for the EV charging sector in the UK. I think we may be the youngest association on the stage. We were established just 2 years ago with 18 members, and we are now just past 40 charge point operators, mobility service providers, and roaming hubs.
Excellent. Jan?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jan Strobel. I'm head of department at the BDEW, which is a German energy organization, branch representation. Well, we are representing not only the energy industry, but as well all the startups, the companies from the mineral oil sector, which are investing in e-mobility, as well as the charging operators from the OEMs and the startups, of course. So it's more 80 to 85% of the chargers in Germany represented by us.
Philippe?
Philippe Vergeel, Director of EV Belgium, also the Association for the Ecosystem of the Full E-Mobility Sector in Belgium with 140 members and already a history since 1978, like my neighbor does. So,
Clément?
Yeah, we are quite old. Good morning, everyone. I'm Clément Molison. I'm the head of Aver France. We represent the EV industry in France. So more than 250 companies mostly.
And Alex?
Last but not least, hopefully, my name is Alexander Reich. I'm the Vice President and co-founder of PSNM, the Polish New Mobility Association. We are a Polish association, but one of the largest in Central Eastern Europe and European Union. We have over 300 members, and we've been on the market since 2016, and very honored to be here with these esteemed speakers.
Very happy to have everyone here with us. So let's start actually our discussion with a paradox. Europe has recently surpassed 1 million public charging points, which is a remarkable milestone for our collective efforts. But despite this, public perception continues to lag behind. Surveys and consumer data constantly shows that many drivers still feel there's not enough charging infrastructure. I think this is something that we hear a lot. And looking at the very recent survey that ChargeMap did, that included also UK, by the way, I was struggling to find surveys that also included UK data. We actually see that 9 out of 10 EV drivers are very satisfied with the EV journey. However, when it comes to perception of density of public charging infrastructure, situation changes a bit. 70%, Belgium actually ranks one of the highest, most satisfied EV drivers, then Germany with 56%, 51% Italy, France 58%, and UK 42%. So with that in mind, I would like to give everyone a bit of the opportunity to start with perspective from your country's lens, where do we stand right now? So a bit of stock taking with where do we stand in terms of public charging infrastructure? Do we need more public infrastructure? And how do we bridge this perception in communicating to the consumer that there is enough charging infrastructure, and we're also deploying more and more charging infrastructure. I actually started with Philippe because Belgium has recently reached the milestone 100,000 charging points, publicly charging points. Do we need more public infrastructure in Belgium, and what's the perception there?
First, we were very happy with achieving this number, and then indeed we brought broadly the message from achieving this. It's also a joint effort. It's not the first one, it's not a 100,000 one, it'll be all the charging in this scope that made it happening. So we're very proud with our members that we achieved this number. But bringing this message to the public audience was quite important because, like you said, the perception is still there from, we are lacking, etc., etc. And this triggering with this number, we want to get away this kind of perceptions that still are alive. Is it well balanced, the charging station over the country? Certainly not. So there is still work to do. And that was also the message that we brought. Within 5 years, we actually have to double these charging points if we continue on the path of the electrification of the fleet. So, good message, but still challenges.
Jan, looking at you, I know Germany is leading in terms of absolute numbers, right? I think we're like at 180,000, if I'm not mistaken. I know numbers are going up every day, so it's a bit difficult to keep up with statistics.
Well, I'm happy to tell you that we are not really discussing the numbers anymore in Germany. And I think this was really a big progress in our public discussion. We had this 2017 when I started was always we had not enough chargers in Germany, and we always tried to explain to people, well, it's like counting the coins in your wallet and you don't know how much you have in it because you don't count the value. This is the same about charging infrastructure, so we actually have to count the capacity, installed capacity. We are very happy about that the German government took this up and that the EU Commission as well in the AFI regulation. And this also represents something like the high power charging strategy that we have in Germany as well. So I think we have a very balanced approach with regard to charging infrastructure. Actually, I don't like to talk about infrastructure anymore. I like to talk about chargers. So it's because it's a service. It's like hotel or something like that. And I think what is also very important that in Germany we have a recognition nowadays also by the car industry that we have very good numbers and capacity of charging infrastructure. We see that actually also because we have very low usage over all the years, which actually is a problem for the industry. But so on the one hand, yes, we're not talking about numbers anymore, which is very good. And we are looking now for the usage because we have to get it up in order to earn money in the future.
I fully agree that we have to move a bit away from this quantitative towards qualitative, right, perspective, especially that the methodology of counting charging points is very different. And looking at you, Francesco, right, and also Jared, I know methodologies can vary a lot. So comparing these numbers across, countries is not always most relevant. And also touching upon what Jan said, how do we actually drive utilization? How do we make the charging infrastructure more visible to the EV driver?
Let's start from the counting. I think counting is simple at the end. The point is to have the information. For example, we count the installed charging point, but also how much they are active, how many they are active. Of course, there's a differentiation. We have 15% of the entire network that is not connected yet. but it is installed. So the capex is there, and that's why we are counting it, because it's also a matter of perception of the customers. We also try to to have a comparison with other countries to measure many different parameters in which how many charging points per BEV, how many per each 100 kilometers of highways and motorways, and etc. etc. Italy is not. We are not pushing so much as a country in terms of running BEVs on our roads. We have just 320,000 BEVs. But if you look at these parameters, the network is quite good. So the point of the utilization rate, and also about the spread out, the capillarity of the network on our territory is going quite good. So the point for the utilization rate nowadays is not only the perception, is not only the presentation of the charging point, but the point is mainly to have more cars and to sell more cars nationally. This is the first objective. Some part of our government understood this, so they are trying to put some support on the market. But it's every time the main point is and I think it's in Europe in general. So my first word is uncertainty. So. We need something that is durable, that is clear, that can last more than 1 year, and in Italy is not the case. I mean, they changed the situation 5 times in 6 years, and they spent a lot of money. Probably the unique country in Europe on HEVs. So.
We'll touch upon the importance of stability in terms of also regulation and market direction. But first, Jared, maybe you can give us a bit more perspective from the UK market.
Absolutely. Francesco said counting is easy, but it wouldn't be the UK without counting it a slightly different way to the European Union, just because so our official stats are based on charging devices. So we have 85,000 charging devices in the UK, which I think corresponds to about 115,000 EVSE, which I think is the EU metric. So we're not bottom of that league table, at least. One really important thing we're working on and struggling with as a sector in the UK is that I understand it's relatively easy to get signage towards charge points in the European Union, depending on the market. It is extraordinarily difficult to get signage installed to point towards EV chargers in the UK, whether that's on a local road where the council has to approve it and says no, whether it's a motorway service sign where you can only have 6 symbols on the sign apparently, and they're all taken by KFC and McDonald's, or indeed to get one installed on a main road where you've installed a hub at great expense alongside the road. You need to have fuel provision to get signage for those ones, which clearly we are not super interested in. So I think signage is a really important topic for us. We are looking rather jealously at what's happening in European markets, where I think it's much easier to find a charge point, because obviously the easier it is to find one, the easier it is to get there and start charging and get the utilisation up. So that's a key focus for us.
Thank you so much. So looking a bit more to my left, I would like to give Clément also the opportunity to tell us what's happening in France in terms of deployment of charging infrastructure, because I think you're also doing quite a good job, but things could be better.
Yeah, of course. I think we are in quite the same position as Germany. We moved from a debate on the number of infrastructure to quality, availability, and now we are more on pricing. So France has one of the largest charging network in Europe. We have 175,000 chargers. So the network is already quite huge, but the perception is not yet here for both EV drivers and the general population. But if I can tell you a quick story. In 2018, the French government and the automotive sector decided that by the end of 2022, we should have 100,000 chargers. In 2020, previous French minister decided that the new deadline will be by the end of 2021. So I spent 2021 saying to the media, yeah, it will be difficult to achieve this number by the end of the year. I spent 2022 saying, yes, we are late, but we are not late by the previous date. And we achieved in May 2023. So I spent 2023 explaining to the media why we were late. So on the period of 3 years, I had to go to the media and to the general population saying, no, we have infrastructures. But the message, the perception was there is no charging station in France. So yeah.
So it's also important to set realistic targets, right? I remember also in Germany this debate about how many charging stations we should have deployed, how many EVs we should have on the roads, right? Was a discussion a couple of years ago. And very happy to hear that we're moving away from that. Alex, maybe you can give us a bit of insights of what's happening in Poland, because Poland is picking up pace very quickly, right, and advancing e-mobility. But there are also some regional disparities in Poland between, the more urban, rural areas. How do you actually ensure a more consistent consumer experience given those disparities?
Yeah, so this is definitely going better for the fleet currently. We had a huge spike in growth of over 25,000 vehicles added in just 7 months out of 70,000 last year. So that's a huge growth. In terms of charging infrastructure, we're definitely growing fast, but not fast enough. So it's 10,700 charging points at this point today, out of which 34% are DC charging points. So this is important because we have the third largest 10T, and so we need this rapid charging corridor for our road system. And this is very important. We have 7,500 kilometers of 10T. It's a big country European-wise, so it's important to note that. And I mean, I think what Francesco said is very important because we have one program of subsidies that was deployed in 2021 that was quite big, I think at about 250 million euros. And now we have more subsidy programs, which I'm saying apart from connecting your facility and all the other things that are happening. So we're going to invest probably €500 million into charging for trucks, which presently can also be used for passenger vehicles because it's 350, so it's applicable. So we're going to see these growths hugely advancing in the next couple of years, definitely. And we're already seeing that happening. We're seeing a lot of these hubs popping up on some of the main roads. But I think what you're saying is very true. I mean, you have about 2,000 charging points around Warsaw alone, the capital of Poland, where if you look to the area that's closer to the area of Warsaw, Ukraine, or the eastern border, you have much, much less, and that's much less developed area. And really even traveling there with an EV, I'm an early adopter. I've been driving EV for years now, and going there even for vacation or for just traveling is very difficult. You have to plan it. You usually have to charge from the socket. That's the way it is. So it's a big problem. And I think also something that was noted and is interesting for Poland in terms of AFIR targets. We have the capacity that's installed today that's needed for the 225, 227 levels, but we don't have the requisite number of points in the kilometer distance that's regulated by AFIR. So this is an interesting disparity because we have to count both points and capacity because we're at this point in time.
Luckily, we'll have the AFIR review coming up 2026.
Absolutely.
Maybe we can improve something in this regard there. And because we were talking about range anxiety, I am very happy to hear, based on your signals, that that's not the case anymore. But we are moving towards more charge anxiety, right? Like charger angst as well. Although we would like reliability and accessibility not to be topics anymore that we're discussing in the industry, we're still debating them. And reliability was our core topic at ICNC last year. How are we still improving the customer experience around reliability and accessibility? Because I think now we're around 80,000 exactly, 80%, reliability. So looking maybe at Jared, I know that PCPR has very clear provisions on reliability. Is that useful in terms of policy driving a bit the topic? And then I would like to hear from Jan how that situation is in Germany.
It sounds like I should have been here last year because this is my favourite topic, as you know, Adriana. Yes, the public charging regulations in the UK, which are roughly the equivalent of AFIR, EU's AFIR regulations, set a 99% target for reliability, which has been, I think, quite helpful for signalling that this is an important topic for drivers and for the government, and of course that's always helpful. Unfortunately, the regulations are measured using OCPI, so measuring in a way that doesn't actually reflect whether the charger is working or not. So I think what the sector has been saying a lot to the government and to customers increasingly over the last couple of years is it's great that we have a signal of intent, but actually I'm not super convinced that the regulations themselves will lead to reliability gains, because we're measuring something that isn't actually representative of what's happening on the ground. With that said, I think we can all say that our members are working hard on reliability, because there's a kind of inherent intrinsic incentive to have your very expensive infrastructure working and kind of taking charging sessions. The least profitable charger is one that is not working, so there is an intrinsic incentive. And certainly, speaking on behalf of UK industry, working very, very closely with hardware manufacturers, grid operators, telecoms, I think the key challenge is that the ecosystem is really, really complicated. And actually a successful charging session has a lot of moving parts. So the sector is definitely working harder with the wider ecosystem to resolve those. So I think I'm reasonably optimistic that the network in the UK will get more reliable, but perhaps wouldn't give the credit to the public charging regulations, if I may.
We don't have regulations in place in Germany, but I know, Jan, you're always advocating for industry because we're very actively driving the market there. Can you maybe share some insights from Germany?
Well, to be honest, I disagree with this discussion.
Excellent.
Because
we like disagreement. Otherwise, it would be boring.
No, but just let me tell you the reason. I mean, if you look at this conference, I mean, what's going on here? There are so many companies who want to show their products, their services, they want to invest more. How are we discussing it here on this stage? We're discussing about regulation, what the states want, what our state targets are, if the regulation is the right thing. I think we can be a lot more self-confident and take a lesson from this discussion about targets that we left behind us. I think all these countries represented here are over fulfilling the RFIA targets, which is good. And it's good actually not to discuss about this anymore, because it's always a problem. This can be the only message. It's a problem. So what is really interesting about e-mobility is what the customer thinks about it. Yeah. So here it's about B2B. That's very fine. And it's also about, I mean, if I offer a product, I'm also offering a reliability. And if I don't met it, I'm out of the market. That's simply competition. And we are so much faster than regulation with this competition, which is very good. And I think this is the reason why we can be a lot more self-confident about it. And the second thing is, if you ask the user what we are doing, we do it regularly every year, 2,000 EV drivers. So not the typical ICE driver who tells you that he has range anxiety and so on. We are asking them at least two very important questions. The first question is a combination of what did you think about e-mobility before you bought your car? And then they tell you something about range, and they tell you something about where can I charge and pricing of the car. And what do you think about it today? It's only one thing left, this is the pricing of the car. So that's a problem from the perspective of the real user. Second thing, what we're asking them is, what do you think about the trend of e-mobility of the last 12 years? And we are making this survey now for the fourth time. Every year they told us it's a very good trend. We are very satisfied with the trend, and actually in the numbers, in the capacity, and in the apps. Yeah, so the service is good. And actually a third question that we have, it's also very funny. What do you think about charging compared to using good old petrol station? I'm sorry for the petrol guys here. 60% tell us that charging is better than fueling your car. But as you said, 98% tell us that the car is a lot better than the old ICE. So what does this tell us? Well, we don't have to we are in a good way with regard to the charging infrastructure, but the only reason why people buy an EV is not the charging infrastructure, it's the car itself, it's the product itself. So we have to be really product focused, we have to be customer focused, and we have to be a lot more self-confident about our product.
I think that's actually a very valuable insight, Jan, and I would agree with you that we need to look a bit in depth at the customer, right? Who are we actually talking about? And maybe on a more anecdotal note, looking at the EAFO customer survey, how they define the average EV driver, basically. So it's represented by a 35 to 55-year-old man living in a detached house with a middle income and a high education level. We know, looking at the granularity level, that that's not actually true. But Jan, also, I'm reading the surveys, and I read actually one of the surveys that you did on customer satisfaction as well, and you were talking about this critical point of transition from the early adopters to the early majority. And this is something that I would like to ask everyone, and maybe starting with you, because how is the early majority actually defined? How are the new trends like digital payments, like smart bidirectional charging, all those factors that are coming in now to the market affecting the transition to e-mobility?
Well, actually, for the deeper discussion of these different groups, I don't know if Axel is here. I would suggest to discuss with the supplier. We are primarily discussing the questions. But what's interesting about this early mover, the innovators in the beginning and the early movers, adopters that are coming into the field now, is that the satisfaction with the charging system is stable. So this means that the charging system accelerates in its development as the market does itself. I think this is a very positive thing. And the second aspect is we discussed, Axel and I, we discussed it yesterday. We are thinking about this price thing. Yeah, and you mentioned it. In Germany, people are complaining about the 80 cent. And actually, I don't know, did anybody here ever pay 80 cent? No. Okay. So I think everybody uses his right contract. So this is a thing typical for our branch. We are just focusing on a negative point and accelerate it. I think people are paying 80 cent in Germany. Some people does, because we have not only private cars, but we have fleet cars as well, and they don't care about the price. So this is my thesis. We will see if that turns out right. So we need more competition there of private owners, but the positive message there is as well, the private owners, they already use the right contract. And a second thing that Axel told me is, you know what? The people that are complaining about the prices are the innovators. The first movers that were used to that at IKEA and so on, you could charge for free. But the early adopters, they're not complaining about the price. It's fine for them. They can afford it. And actually, if you compare the prices, it's not actually more expensive than gasoline or diesel. But of course, charging is not cheap enough in order to compensate for the higher costs of buying a car. That's a problem, but actually it's not our problem.
So I know that Aver France also does a lot of surveys. Clément, maybe you can also share some insights from France on this.
Yeah, we run a large national consumer survey, and we did it in 2020 and 2024. The idea for us was to see the before and after the sales boom in 2020. And the main result is that the satisfaction remains quite high at 93%. So even if EVs are going mainstream, we are still, the new drivers, the new EV drivers are still very happy with their vehicles. They are even more happier. They are happier than the IC drivers with their new car. So it's quite high. So, but we also see that the level of expectation is also higher, because you do not want anymore to go on the road and to have an adventure with your EV. You want to have certainty. You want to receive the right information to pay not only the right price, but the price you were anticipating when you started your journey. So this is also the result that we are receiving. The issue is still that only half of the respondents are happy with their experience on the public charging, and I think it is also mainly because the huge amount of charging happened at home, and so if you have one bad public charging experience, it will be quite huge in your perception, even if some of you may have used IC cars before, of course, not anymore. You have seen out of service fuel station, or at least one vessel, and you don't say that you don't have enough fuel station. In France, we have 5 times more charging station than fuel station. So yeah, I think we have to move past that and having a discussion on what we need what the users are needing and what the future user will need.
I think you touched upon a very important point, Clément, because we were looking only at public charging, right? But we also have to look at private charging, because most of the people actually charge at home or at workplace. Maybe, Philippe, you can share a couple of insights, what Belgium is doing on this front, and how our policies and market initiatives driving, the initiative in terms of dynamic prices or smart and bidirectional services. I know that Belgium is very active on this front as well.
Well, in the first place, many of the EVs that are bought are company cars. It's really from that point that starts. And what we see is that now we also shift from the early adapters, that employees that don't have the choice anymore, that they have to get an EV. And so this is a different kind of audience, that they are forced to choose for the EV and go on the road with that, and they have a different experience than the early adapters that want to have an EV. But then we see also a change, because the operators or the employers, they see that the behavior of these kind of drivers is also very different. If you just give them a charging pass, they just go away, and they don't care about the price like they did before. And the employers, they said, to start to realize that I offering charging points at work, and also often, if possible, with the employer at home, and I have a very preferential tariff. And if we keep that, if we don't make any differentiation to force them to charge at the cheapest tariff, I can see a very big budget impact. And so we see in the car policy with the employers that there is a shift ongoing, that maybe even not allowed to, certain categories are not even allowed to charge anymore at public charging points. So it's very shifting tendency. On the aspect of consumer service, I think I don't know if we need to do that more, because everybody knows that an EV driver is so happy with his car. I think we need more to do also service on the reliability of a charging network. And what really caught my attention was a benchmark study done in the Netherlands, where you see that testing the public charging points, that the interoperability actually went backwards and not even getting better. So instead of testing our customers, we should actually test our own hardware and see if it's all reliable with the AFI regulation, which at the end is in place. So there is also responsibility to take from our sector themselves.
Maybe from Poland, is it easier to charge at home in Poland compared to other markets across Europe, or more difficult?
A lot to unpack, actually. So maybe I'll start with your question, actually. We also do, of course, a lot of speaking to consumers in the market, and we do it in various ways, because we speak to companies, to consumers, we also speak to the government. We have a sister organization, EV Club Poland, which has a lot of the EV drivers, as a community also, so we can communicate with them directly. And we know, for example, out of all these different surveys that we do, that every third consumer who's thinking of buying vehicles now considering a BEV in Poland, which is a great shift, because 2 years ago that was below 8%. So
this is really great, and this is a big rise. In terms of charging at home, every 4 out of 5 EV drivers in Poland prefer to charge at home. Whether it's easier, that's a difficult question because, first of all, energy prices in Poland are quite crazy. Because of the lack of flexibility of our grid, we're one of the 2 countries in Europe that actually has more expensive energy prices during the night. So this is a flip for most of other markets. But of course, this is changing with renewables and everything that's being done in terms of grid investments, right? So we have these huge subsidies for trucks, for truck charging, but we also have 500 million subsidies for the grid connections and the grid investments related to truck charging, right? So this is a system approach that I think will work. And here, I think it's important to note that we're really talking about passenger vehicles here, and mostly what consumers are deciding. But I agree with that assertion. In Poland, 80% of the vehicles are fleet-owned. So we also need to look at that from that standpoint. And there, what I think we define as private charging again comes up, because a lot of that is how we resolve charging for fleets, right? With AC charging, that's usually in the private model charging. And then one other thing that we're taking out of this discussion, which is very important for Poland, and very important because of an economic standpoint, because it concerns 700,000 jobs, 8% of our GDP, is the heavy-duty vehicle charging. So I think it was said here that most of us are on route to achieving the AFIR goals and targets, but Poland is definitely not even close to achieving the targets for the EHDV charging for AFIR, right? There we are at 6%. So we have 6 hubs, which is not very big for the 10T that I mentioned, so for the amount needed. And the charging there, I mean, the capacities, the grid connections that are needed, all the permits, even the locations, for maneuverability. This is a whole other ball game, and I think it's really important to understand that you cannot really talk about charging just in this consumer-focused way, because it's so much bigger than that today. And when we're speaking of AFIR targets and private charging, we need to focus on EPBD targets, because in Poland, we're very far from that. In some areas, as you mentioned, rural, maybe a little remote, I don't think anything like the right to plug is even, considered. So there are things to do also in that area. And I think the discussion on charging in terms of the perspective, you cannot just focus on the passenger vehicle charging, on your highway, or the numbers or the AFIR targets related to that alone. It's today an economic question of developing the future of mobility as an industrial sector.
You touched upon a very important point, the investments that are being done already in our industry, right? So I would like to ask, especially Clément and Jan here, France and Germany are the economic engine driving the discussion also in Brussels. How important are stable policy frameworks for actually driving that investment forward? And then we know that Emmanuel Macron recently met with Friedrich Merz in Toulon, and their economic declaration has this message on we need technology neutrality with more flexibility, but also actually uphold the climate goals. So how do the 2 narratives actually go hand in hand? Jan? Or?
Okay. Well, I think, first of all, we still tend to discuss this whole industry with regard to climate goals. They're important, of course, but we also have to keep in mind it's an industry. And it's an important industry, actually, for all over Europe. And I think this is also one very important thing that we have to keep in mind also when we discuss about fleet targets in Brussels now. Well, with regard to Germany, we just calculated roughly only for the chargers themselves, we invested something like 5 billion in Germany alone. So it's a lot, and I think, Francesco mentioned it also for Italy and so on, there are huge amounts already invested in this business. And what we also have to keep in mind is that the whole industry wants to move forward. It's not that we are doing something in order to fulfill any EU targets. We are doing something because we want to do business. So I think this is something very, very and very important aspect that we have to keep in mind when we discuss about fleet targets now and how to move forward. So this is also why I say we have to be more self-confident what we already achieved, and we have to be more demanding towards politics. And it's not only about getting our costs down by making easier grid access and so on. We need the cars. We simply need the cars in order to make money. Yeah.
Clement?
Yeah, I totally agree with what you just said, and I think the issue is what is stable now. The CO2 standard has just been put in action 2 years ago. A month after, maybe a day, an hour after, you already heard voices saying we should revise that CO2 the CO2 standard. So we are not allowing ourselves and our industry to grow and to prove that we can do that. In 2025, with the flexibility on sanctions, we know that we will sell less car than we were supposed to. That's the sad reality of that. And this is my issue with the actual discussion with flexibility on 2035 is that flexibility, I know for OEMs, for car makers, they are innovators. They want to have the freedom to go in every direction that they want if they want that. But the reality is that flexibility will lead in the general population to the idea that we have time. EV will be maybe for just some people, and me, I don't have to worry about that. And there is also is almost schizophrenic discourse, debate, because when you ask for flexibility on one end, but on the other, you ask for a strong battery industry in Europe. You ask for a large available network, charging network, but you can have one and not the other. We need to have a trajectory, an ambitious, strong, stable trajectory to have that batteries in Europe, to have charging network that actually works, because let's be honest, maybe in a few years, if we don't have enough EVs on the road, some network will not survive. And what is the message that we'll have in media when one network will disappear? We had the issue in France, but we had COVID just a month after, so it was not never a topic. But it could have been quite catastrophic for publicity for AVs.
I think the message was loud and clear. I think Jan has a...
No, just let me add. The message is, if the car industry is allowed not to paying penalties, we will pay the penalty for that. Yeah, that's simply the point. And in the end, it's also about the industry structure in Europe, as you said. Yeah, so we don't want to pay the penalty for the automotive industry.
Jared, looking at the UK, actually, is the EU able to learn something from the UK lessons? Because recently the UK government actually upheld the ZEF mandate. Maybe you can...
Yeah, I won't fall into the trap of saying that the European Union should learn anything from the UK. Not enough time has passed for that. Briefly, to give you an idea of what happened in the UK, we have a slightly different framework. We have annual sales targets for automotive manufacturers, increasing over time, obviously. The automotive manufacturers, I think, started using the same messages in London as they are in Brussels now about 12 to 18 months ago. And the government announced earlier this year that while the headline targets would be retained, there would be significant additional flexibilities, which is a good word, I think. Flexibilities, they mean loopholes for car makers to delay the sales of BEVs and replace them with FEVs, or indeed to borrow against their future quotas. So the headline trajectory has stayed, but the actual number of BEVs that will be sold each year, I think, will inevitably fall. If I had a lesson to learn from that, is indeed, as Jan said, I think there is still a perception at the ministerial level and official level as well that the charging infrastructure investment is some sort of passion project, which of course it is for many of us. They have not quite realised that that investment is completely dependent on a very clear trajectory of vehicles on the road, because those are our customers. And we really struggle to make that case that this is not just a bit of fun, this is jobs and investment now. But this will also be a massive, massive sector in the future if you help us to get there. So we didn't quite lose, I don't think, because it was followed by demand-side measures. We've got a very healthy new car grant, which is helping uptake sort of neutralise the effect of the loopholes. But that would be my advice to you. Start to pitch it as investment and growth, not climate change and green ambitions. I don't think that cuts through quite so much as it used to.
I think that's a very good insight, and maybe the ZEF mandate is not necessarily the best practices or lessons learned from the UK, but I think that we do have a lot to learn from each other. Maybe looking at Francesco, you can tell us what Italy actually can teach the other countries, or in terms of improvement.
At least for many things not to do to develop the electric mobility. Anyway, I think that we did surveys also, and I think from we can direct the policies from the customer perspective. So nowadays we still have a lot of people that are buying electric mobility. First driver is cost saving. Third driver is to have a charging point at home. So a lot of them are domestic chargers, domestic drivers, let me say. So first of all, in order to make the utilization rate grow, because I think here we are all interested in it, I really think that first of all, we need to lower the cost of tariff. In Italy, it's the highest one on medium voltage, and it's absolutely impossible to have a margin to gain something, not to recover the investment in high power charging. That is growing a lot actually in Italy, so it's kind of a problem. So first of all, tariffs. Lesson learned from Italy, not do like Italy. We have a lot of problems on energy tariffs applied to CPOs and then to final customers.
There's also a price observatory, right, in Italy?
But they don't have any clue of of what is the price at the final customer, and so we tried to explain that 60% is the weight of the energy tariff applied to CPO respect to the final price at the customers. So 60% is just the energy, and then you have to add everything, So it's impossible to deal with it. The other point is, I think we should, in order to make the utilization rate grow, and make the public charging infrastructure grow also. Is to also leverage on fleet. It's important. The fleet mandate is important, but I think that we should have learned that mandate, obligations, and target are not the only answer and not the only policy we should leverage on. I really think we should push a big European review of the fiscal treatment of the fleets, the company cars, especially on deductibility. It's crucial, and it's working very well in Belgium.
Exactly.
It's working very well in UK. We finally in Italy reviewed the BIK policy, but we really need that the companies have the advantage to make the BEVs available for the employees. And I really think that this can bring more people to public charging and make the utilization rate grow. Because nowadays, most of the Italians are leveraging their domestic charging.
So looking at you, Philippe, because indeed Belgium is doing things right on the tax policies for corporate companies. What can the other EU member countries or UK learn from that?
Well, I would bring the message from having a stable policy framework that is continuing for many, many years. And after Europe got inspired on our ZEF mandates, our government started actually to discuss this again and open again for plug-in hybrids. They didn't achieve it at the end, but you see this in the sales, a drop of sales, mixed feelings by the audience, and people get confused. We bought EVs, now can we buy plug-in hybrids? Again, what should we do? And we lost sales, we lost of success. We get, again, the perception of the bigger public is again getting wrong. And now we see a take-up again, literally, but the general sales have been dropping. So the message is really keeping that policy straightforward, keep it consistent, and maybe referring to our friends in Norway, that's the success where they made it.
Looking at you, Clément, how important are policy frameworks for e-mobility, but how important are, in general, policy trajectories important for e-mobility as well, because we're all looking forward to see what's going to happen on the 8th of September in France.
Yeah, it is quite...
and how that will impact the sector.
Yeah, it's quite huge because in our survey we asked the EV drivers that if they would have still bought their car if there was no subsidy, and half of them said no. So no subsidy, no EVs. On tax or mandate, I'm not quite sure which is the best solution in France. We have mandate on private cars, private company, and for the first time, because the government put sanction in the balance, we have seen the fleets going electric. And the mandates were in place for the last 2 or 3 years. Also, of course, we also are looking at the private buyers, because in France we have a social leasing, which was a huge success last year. In 3 weeks, I think, after 3 weeks, the social leasing was suspended because there were too many demands. And the government even decided to double the number of beneficiaries of the social leasing. So the idea is to target lower income households, and we will have a new edition of the social leasing in September. It is a very good subsidy scheme because it shows that there is no that EVs are for everybody. It's not only for the richest of us, but also for lower income people. But it costs a huge amount of money. It's more than 10,000 euros per car. So it's quite huge, and it cost us a scheme for private companies because of that last year. So it's good. It is a good acceleration scheme, but it is not sufficient for to achieve mass market.
Looking at you, Jan, because I know the German government is considering a sort of a German version of the social leasing, just thinking if this is also going to be maybe one measure that will be included in the new master plan. There is no news or rumors that there's going to have Germany is going to have a new master plan for charging infrastructure. Maybe you can share some insights of what we can expect from the German government.
Well, yes, it's true that we will have our third master plan on charging infrastructure since 2019. So, big achievement. We had it already in the last legislation and the one before.
78 measures, if I recall correctly, right? Quite a lot of
64. All of them.
They managed to bring them down.
Yeah, most of them were completed. Or said so. So it's a question: what shall we put in again? Actually, our message is we don't need a master plan for charging infrastructure because this is only problem focused again. We need a strategy for e-mobility in Germany. So, and then we are talking about taxation. Totally agree with what Francesco said. I think this is the best approach to do it, and we see it in the company cars because in Germany, we have this Dienstwagen privilege. This works very well. So we have to think about what is about private passenger cars. With regard to social leasing, yes, it's an aspect that is discussed. I think the Social Democrats are in favor, the Conservatives are against, and our household is a bit difficult. So we will see. At least our message is that with regard to the charging infrastructure for trucks, there are at least 2 billion planned by the government to be spent there. We don't want that money. As the industry, we don't want that money by the state because we don't want that the state builds charging infrastructure by himself. This is what would happen there. And so there would be 2 billion available to put into the cars. Would be cool. And just to mention that because Alexander talked about the RFI targets for EV along the 10T corridors. We checked that for Germany, we have already over-fulfillment 5 times of the 2025 targets just by private chargers. So we don't need a state-owned chargers there. So 2 billion open for discussion. Where to put it would be cool.
Also, AFIR defines minimal targets, right? So we can always be more ambitious, but I agree that the market should drive the direction. Alex, maybe you can tell us a bit more what's happening in Poland in terms of best practices. What can we learn from what's happening in your country?
I think it's a mix. We have some things that are maybe similar to what Francesco said that maybe shouldn't be done, and most of those are the lack of the ability to use EU support, I think, appropriately. So we did miss the opportunity of the Resilience and Recovery Fund. We're now on the verge of missing the Social Climate Fund, which we're the biggest beneficiary of as planned. And for transport alone, it's supposed to be over 4 billion euros, which is, I think, very useful. And we were proposing to deploy more charging in remote areas and deploy a very good social leasing fund like in France. Also, we were trying to deploy this kind of mechanism that's also used in France because it's a self-sustaining mechanism, right, from the CO2 emissions of the ICE vehicles that funds the social leasing. And so we wanted to do that. The government is not really responsive. It's very delayed. It's not accepting the ETS2 parameters. And so we think that's not a good thing. Another thing that I think was mentioned and is important and is of great significance, and we spoke about this with investors from the US, from Asia, from various regions, that Poland fails to have a lasting industrial strategy regarding the automotive, and every 4 or 5 years it's changed strategically, which is difficult, I think, for many investors, especially in the e-mobility sector. So obviously, we have some pretty interesting examples of what's going on with an industrial park that's based on what was supposed to be the Polish electric car, but will now be more of an e-mobility industrial park with innovation, R&D, and autonomous testing and stuff like that. So there are good things and bad things. And I think in terms of regulation, we're pretty good at actually implementing EU regulation on batteries, in terms of AFIR PBD, we're doing a good job, I think. So there are good examples and bad examples. I think, though, that the lasting strategic approach should be a priority. And I think it should be a priority to really use the opportunities if brought from Brussels. And this is for the entire Central Eastern European region, this is true. Because they will cease. And the next MFF is clearly already stated that it will not include energy transition or mobility. Will be focused on defense, cybersecurity, and stuff like that. So I think we have to really do everything now in the next couple of years because we might miss this opportunity. I think regulation is important, though. There is a different mentality in different parts of Europe, always. In our part of Europe, you're not really obliged to do something, then you might take a little longer time to do it. So we as an organization feel we should oblige ourselves as much as we can and make really ambitious targets. But obviously this is also a perspective from a country that has a lot to do.
Looking at Jared, maybe you can share, I know maybe you don't like the concept of best practices, but I'm sure you can find something that the UK does better or could learn from the EU.
I'm getting a menacing look from Jan, which makes me not want to. I think, to be honest, more things come to mind that we would love to learn from you. Renewable credit schemes in European member states are really exciting, and we look at them with lots of jealousy. We would love to have renewable credit schemes in the UK. I get messages from country managers of operators who are active on both sides of the channel saying, where's my 5 pence per kilowatt hour, or whatever the credit value might be. So that's one thing we'd love to learn from you. one thing that's really practical that the UK government has done is set up, I'm not sure they describe themselves this way, but I describe them as the barrier busting team. And of course there are some issues that they can't resolve, but they find the things that they can and sort of systematically chop down the barriers. So they've done a lot of work on removing requirements to seek planning permission for certain types of sites. They've streamlined little bits of processes. It's certainly not glamorous or sexy work, but I think it's having a massive impact. And just by having that team that's sole focus is getting rid of barriers and little sticky things that make it more difficult to deploy has made a massive difference over the last couple of years. So if you'd like to suggest that to your national governments, I can send you some information.
On the first point, actually, I think the EU countries could also do better because the Renewable Energy Directive actually also allows member states the flexibility to extend it to private charging, right? And not a lot of member states are doing that. I know that for the moment, we were supposed to have Arturo, but I know that the current draft law that is being debated in Spain does not contain that. So I think that's the case for a lot of EU member states as well, right? But I know that Germany is planning to do something more on the GHG quota trading.
I mean, this is still up for discussion. It's our position that it should be extended to the private sector. Of course, it has. In Germany, we always have this problem with the calibration law. And if you want to use it in the private sector, you have to measure it. And that's always a bit tricky. I think we have to find a good way there. But in general, yes, of course, would be cool.
Also looking a bit at time, because I think this discussion could go on and on for hours, but being mindful of the time, I would like to give the audience maybe also the opportunity to ask a couple of questions. If there are some couple of questions from your side, I have a colleague here that can bring a mic. So, questions? Okay.
Lunchtime.
Yeah, maybe then I would like to ask another question before we end our session. The EV journey does not stop at national borders, right? So I think we have to be mindful of that. And I just wanted to ask how, the national associations are actually working together to create this seamless and secure EV journey and how we can improve collaboration across the EV ecosystem. Jan, looking at you because it seems like you have an answer already ready.
I think this is a very important topic. We have to be aware of that e-mobility is no national thing. Actually, it's a European market at least. I mean, what is Haptic doing? I'm very happy about the AFIR to have one clear framework all over Europe because of, I think all our member companies they want to provide the same product and service all over Europe, and I think the customers, they think it should be like that as well. So I'm always wondering, for example, why we have national regulation for something that is a real European topic. What can a national regulator add positively? Maybe he can take away the calibration law in Germany, but no, I think we have to think a lot more European. And will be interesting, Alexander, to discuss then your approach with the German approach anyhow. No, but you're totally right. We should do so even more. I'm happy that ChargeOut reaches out to all of us discussing the topics, but could be better. True.
Alexander?
Well, we're definitely involved in a lot of the HDV work, as I said, and we think it's really of paramount importance because this is, the circulatory system of the EU really, and so we're working on charging corridors for the EHDV market with Dutch and German players mostly, but also international NGOs like CalStart, for example, so also reaching over across the pond. So we're very involved in that regard. We're very active in terms of e-mobility Europe, trying to work on common initiatives. We even, starting from battery fires, which is the big, mythical dragon that's standing against, and it's still present in Poland and in various areas. And so we've worked with, for example, Air France on that, and other and our Italian friends. So. It's very important to just touch upon whatever is done best in a particular markets and then apply that, because a lot of it has been done. So for the social leasing, we've been connecting to EDRI, to Air France, we've been talking to the relevant partners. We speak to all of our friends across Europe, wherever we can kind of soak up the best examples. And this is the comfort of being an asset market, obviously. We can do this. But for the heavy-duty vehicle market, we're all learning together. So the corridors that have, and this is UK is part of Europe here. There's no separation. So we're also, of course, interested in that kind of partnership as well. So I think every area requires it. We're trying to do that. And in terms of regulation, I agree. It's just member states often don't perceive EU law as being superior to member state law. And that's a philosophy you really have to kind of foster amongst member states. And then EU law will suffice. But until we get there really universally, it's a balance.
I think in terms of regulation, heavy duty will definitely receive a special attention with the AFIR review. And also, EU regulation is not always taking into or is taken seriously because there is a very long process in actually, establishing infringement procedures or actually penalties, which is a bit different from the UK. UK definitely has very clear fines in place if you don't comply, right? So, Jared, maybe you can share a bit how you coordinate also across the ecosystem.
Yeah, despite the UK leaving the EU, we do try and stay close to the EU conversation. I have the benefit or the displeasure of having worked on AFIR in a previous role, so I'm pretty clued in on what's happening with AFIR. I think in some ways the UK being out of the tent is actually quite helpful for both sides. We've got very similar markets in terms of demographics, in terms of economic development, in terms of car makers. We have a kind of shared history as well. And the markets have lots of similarities, which is helpful for making comparisons, but also some differences. So I joked to Clément before we walked up here, how did you get your prices so low, Clément? Because this is the problem we're facing in the UK of being under a lot of pressure for affordability. And then Francesco and I have we've been talking about having a shared problem on terms of fixed network costs, which are driving the prices up. So I think having these two connected but separate markets on each other's doorstep is actually really helpful for us as representatives of sectors, because it means we can kind of keep in touch with each other. When Francesco solves that problem, I can just copy and paste his answer, and we can kind of learn together. I think it's really handy to have, actually.
So Francesco, what's the solution?
To not feel alone. So finally, I can share my problem with someone about tariffs. I really think that a data-driven approach is important. So we should start to collect the data among all the. So I suggest also you, Jan, if you want to join our data collection project in E-Mobility Europe, we really need the data from Germany. So this is the first time I talk about it. So it's fine.
It's a first at ICNC.
And so we will have the possibility to present the real data that I really agree. It shouldn't be just a climate change narrative, but it's a technology shift, it's industry, investment, and so on. And another thing that I would like to say, it's now we are fighting, with two sides, and it's true. We have different objectives, but at the end we have a huge field, in which we could collaborate with ASEA, for example, energy tariffs for charging infrastructure. It's something we should work on together. Fiscal review and on fleets is something we should work together, and we can find a way to talk with the others. Probably not with oil and gas, of course, but I really think that with a technology point of view, an industrial point of view, we can find a way. Not in these very months; it's impossible. Now we have to play two roles, but after December, I guess I hope. As soon as possible, because I cannot take it anymore. I cannot talk about 2035 more than 2 months more. But I really think we should find a way to talk together, because if not, we are going to hit a wall. Thank you.
We're all looking forward to the McKinsey study that is actually subsidized by ASEA coming out in the IAA, and I think that's going to be a lot of interesting messages to digest, let's say. Jan, we have the VDA with the 10 points plan. Maybe you want to comment briefly on that as well. How is it going in terms of the dialogue with the auto industry in Germany? I know they're always saying there's not enough charging infrastructure, then they're looking at prices, so there's always like critical points, right? We should all work together because in the end, as Francesco said, we all share the same goal.
Well, I don't want to comment on competitors. It's with regard to the 10-point plan that you mentioned, there are two aspects in it that we totally support. The first one is that they want to keep up the climate targets. That's cool. And the last one is that they want to have positive communication. So what's in between it about PS, range extenders, and so on, we don't support it. Of course, yes. So, and I think that's a thing. First of all, we have to be aware of that we as an industry, we have nothing to lose with regard to fossil fuels. Yeah. So we are only earning by expanding the market. This is what we want. Other stakeholders have understandable problems with that. I think I totally understand it. I mean, we as an industry, we also have this discussion about the nuclear power plants in Germany, the coal industry, and so on. So we are not the ones who can point on others, but we have to be aware of that we have a conflict on the interests there. That's simply like that. And we want to push forward. And I think, as you said, fiscal solutions on the European level would be the right thing. And I think what we also have to be aware of that in the end, it's a very important strategic topic for Europe. It's not only for us. And this is the point where I hope that in the end we will get together. But just now it's about today. The earnings, the business cases of today, not the ones of tomorrow. The tomorrow ones are strategic ones. The ones today are real in your pocket, so to say. So this is why we have the discussion. We have to be realistic about it. But I think it's cool that you here put it up, like bringing together the people from the countries and how we can push it forward together. Thank you.
A couple of words also from Philippe and Clément about ecosystem collaboration.
For us, ecosystem is the right approach. We always work with the ecosystem as a starting point. We work with OEMs, CPO, MSPs, local authorities, and energy providers. And so I think it is the right approach, because when we are talking with with policymakers, with the French administration and government, it is what they are looking for, is to have a strong one voice from the industry, from the ecosystem. To get back to your first question, I think that historically we have been, as National Association, we have been working within ABRE Europe, now e-mobility Europe, but I think we can do more in reaching out to one another. PSNM is doing that, and we had good discussions on the right to plug, for example. But we have been we have been busy with the national level for the past 5-6 years. So it has been quite difficult, to be honest, to rise up the chin and look outside of our borders. So yeah, it's about reaching out and sharing best practices.
Philippe?
Well, where to conclude?
Famous last words.
Famous last words. I think the industry has a lot of things in place, and we can just do it. And I think the collaboration should also be part. Like the 2035 target is not a standalone file. It's connected with so many other things. And we talked about A4. A4 is there. It's the chicken and egg question that comes with the car and the vehicles. The charging points are coming there. They are there. EPBD is there, the RED 2, coming now the RED 3, ETS is there, and they're all interconnected. And if we can all implement it at the best, that with the intention that they have been written, there is actually no excuse to do it. And I think there the collaboration and the support that we should give to each other, that the industry can step up and say that we can achieve this. But just already control and keep that consumer focus as well. That's sort of, we still talk about conceptions, etc., etc. So we still have to have a high focus on at the consumer perception here.
So in view of time, I would like to thank all the panelists for the brilliant insights shared today. And I see we have a lot of common challenges, but also a lot of good ground for solutions to push forward together. Thank you very much. And let's continue the conversation beyond the time.